After an incredible Canadian Grand Prix in tricky and wet conditions, F1 is moving back to Europe and to Barcelona for the Spanish Grand Prix, which means that once again it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series that I'll be previewing, and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early predictions for the Grand Prix. If you enjoyed the video then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get straight into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top 5 teams later on, which is Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull, so stick around for that. Yes, the Canadian Grand Prix was one of the best races of the year so far, with chaos happening on track along with plenty of overtakes. It was so chaotic that the driver who was technically fastest didn't actually win. Lando Norris was overall the fastest driver, but Max Verstappen took victory. And now we head to Barcelona, and a circuit that will suit cars such as the Red Bull perfectly. The circuit is very high speed and high downforce is typically needed. With them reverting to the old layout at Barcelona, there is no more fiddly chicane, which breaks the flow of the circuit going into the final corner. Funnily enough, that old fiddly chicane would have been the only thing that would have hampered Red Bull, but with it not being there, then the circuit should mean that we see them back to their best, at least with Max Verstappen. With the speed of the circuit and the potential for hot weather, I anticipate that the tyres are going to get absolutely destroyed this weekend, which is going to be making strategies and pit stops even more important. This mixed with the fact that it is actually easier to follow at this circuit and easier to overtake now than in the past, means that we could see yet another excellent Grand Prix. As I mentioned, the tyres take an absolute pounding at this circuit, and because of that, Pirelli will be bringing the hardest tyres in the Pirelli range, which is the complete opposite to what we have been seeing recently, meaning that the C1 is the hard tyre, the C2 is the medium tyre, and the C3 will be the soft compound of tyre. Last year there was a total of 43 pit stops, with a large variety of strategy, as most did 2 stops, but a couple of drivers even did a 3-stop, and there was a lot of variety between the softs, medium and hard tyres being used, as the teams were not quite sure what to do with strategy. Sometimes around this circuit, the C1 tyre doesn't perform quite like the teams would like, meaning that it doesn't get used as often as it maybe would do, but if it is very warm, then they may be forced into using them. I expect a mixture of 2 and 3 stops, but the majority will be opting to do a 2-stop, unless we get very warm temperatures like we saw in 2022. Overtaking at Spain, especially with this layout, is much easier, and you can see that as at last year's Grand Prix, there was a total of 65 on-track overtakes. To help with overtaking, the Barcelona circuit features 2 DRS zones, one down the very long pit straight heading into turn 1, and the second DRS zone is on the exit of turn 9 heading into turn 10. With 2 DRS zones and multiple pit stops being expected, then I once again expect that we will see plenty of on-track overtaking and a lot of excitement for us the fans. And last year the pole position lap time was set by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, and that time was a 1 minute 12.272. During that lap, he reached a top speed of 330 km per hour down the pit straight. In the main Grand Prix itself, the fastest lap was a 1:16.330, also set by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. In the Grand Prix this year, I expect that the qualifying lap time and the race fastest lap will be beaten, especially the race fastest lap if we have a fight at the front of the field for victory. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, starting with Aston Martin. For Aston Martin, in Canada, there was a bit of a return to form as they were able to get both drivers in the points for the first time since the Australian Grand Prix. The circuit was one that was always going to suit their car, and both Alonso and Stroll maximised their results with a P6 and P7 finish. Going into the next race at Spain, I can see it being a little bit more tricky for them. Even so, I still expect that we will see Fernando Alonso in the points in front of his home fans. The circuit is high downforce, but there is still a lot of high speed, and the Aston Martin does have decent downforce and performance in a straight line. so in theory it should still be a decent weekend. The potentially big issue for them could be the tyres, and making sure that the tyre wear is good enough. If it is, then I can see them continue to extend the gap to VCARB, who are trying very hard to close in on them. For Mercedes, the Canadian Grand Prix was an incredible turnaround in performance as George Russell put the car on pole position and led the early portion of the race and finished on the podium, which in Grand Prix conditions was the first time for Mercedes this year. And teammate Lewis Hamilton had a great race and really could have beaten Russell to the podium, and this massive turnaround in performance could continue in Spain. Barcelona has been a great track to Mercedes in the past, and even so in the last 2 years, they have still been somewhat successful. With this in mind, I can see them performing well once again. They will not be the fastest, but I can see them getting into the mix with at least one of the Ferraris or McLaren cars. George Russell did score a podium, but he did definitely make it more tricky than he needed to. For teammate Lewis Hamilton, I'm still a little bit confused as to why he went onto hard tyres for the final stint before the end of the race. I am somewhat surprised Mercedes didn't risk soft tyres with both Russell and Hamilton, but I really didn't understand the point of taking hard tyres instead of sticking with his current tyres at that point in time. For McLaren, the Canadian Grand Prix was a solid result, and now it sees them close the gap to Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. Lando Norris had a fantastic race, and in terms of pace, he was the fastest overall driver in the Grand Prix. For him though, victory slipped away when the safety car came out at the worst possible moment, and in some ways, he was repaid for Miami. Until that moment though, Norris was lapping between 1 and 2 seconds per lap faster than Max Verstappen. Teammate Piastri also had a solid race, but he was beaten by both Mercedes drivers. Going into the Spanish Grand Prix, I expect that McLaren will be very strong once again. They are typically very strong at high downforce and high speed circuits, so I can see them being the closest rivals to Red Bull and Max Verstappen this weekend. Norris has been fantastic on his tyres this year, and with high tyre wear being a possibility, then I think he will be very strong in the race. Teammate Piastri still struggles a little bit when it comes to tyre wear, so I can see him being in the mix during qualifying, but when it comes to the main Grand Prix itself, I can see him slip back just a little bit, and I don't think we will be seeing him on the podium. For Ferrari, Montreal was a disaster. Charles Leclerc had a power unit issue during the race, and then suffered a Ferrari classic strategy call, which ended any hope he had of scoring any points in the race. Teammate Carlos Sainz was just poor in the race. Despite not having a power unit issue, he was still stuck behind Charles Leclerc, and then later in the race he made a mistake and dropped the car, and then ended up having a collision with Alex Albon. This was both hilarious and depressing for Ferrari. After Monaco, there was talks of a fight brewing in the Constructors' Championship, and a couple of weeks later Ferrari go and blow it. Going into Spain, Ferrari are probably going to be the third fastest team overall. Charles Leclerc though is performing very well right now, and I can see him in the mix against the McLaren cars. Carlos Sainz returns to his home race this weekend, and he will be looking to return to form. But it feels like now he is very much on the back foot and behind teammate Charles Leclerc. And finally, for Red Bull, it was victory for Max Verstappen, despite him not being the fastest driver during the race. Teammate Sergio Perez had yet another shocking and disastrous Grand Prix, and he has even landed himself with a 3-place grid penalty for this weekend, so there is a real chance that he is starting in last place. But luckily for Perez, I doubt that will be the case, because I expect Red Bull to be back to their best this weekend. It is typically a very strong track for them, and because of that, I can see Max Verstappen absolutely dominate this weekend. Although, that being said, there is still a chance that I am wrong. So, with that in mind then, what are my very early predictions for the Spanish Grand Prix? Well, the top midfield team and midfield driver will be VCARB, which is not really a surprise anymore, and I think it will be Yuki Tsunoda who is the top midfield driver. But what about the top 5 and qualifying? Well, for pole position, I am going to go for Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, as I think he is going to absolutely dominate this weekend. But what about the top 5 in the Grand Prix? Well, in P5, I'm going to go for George Russell in the Mercedes. P4 will be Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. P3 will be Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. P2 will be Lando Norris. And like I said, I expect Max Verstappen to absolutely dominate the Grand Prix weekend. But those are my thoughts. The question is, what do you guys think will happen? In the comment section down below, please do let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.